You know, I'm not the kind of guy who overreacts. I don't snoop through my wife's phone or interrogate her about her day. Clara and I have always had this unspoken trust. It's one of the things I love most about her. She's brilliant, funny, and one of the most hard-working people I know. But even the best marriages can be tested in ways you'd never expect. It all started with Jason. Clara works at a prestigious corporate firm, and as part of her job, she interacts with a lot of people. So, when she first mentioned Jason, a co-worker who she described as a good friend at work, I didn't think much of it. I figured he was just another colleague, someone who helped her get through long hours at the office. But as time went on, his name started popping up more and more in conversations. Jason helped me finish that big project today. Or, Jason thinks we should try this restaurant for our anniversary. Harmless, right? At least that's what I kept telling myself. Then one day, she referred to him as her work husband. I remember the moment vividly because it caught me off guard. "He's like my work husband," she said, laughing as if it were the most normal thing in the world. I forced a smile and nodded along, not wanting to seem insecure. But something about the phrase didn't sit right with me. You see, I'm not a jealous guy. I've always believed that Clara deserves her space and her independence. But Jason, well, he was different. There was something about the way she spoke about him, like he was more than just a coworker. And then there were the little details. The way her face lit up when she talked about his sense of humor, or how she seemed to value his opinions, sometimes even more than mine. At first, I chalked it up to my own insecurities. Maybe I was overthinking it. But the more I heard about Jason, the more I started to feel like an outsider in my own marriage. And the worst part? Clara didn't seem to notice how uncomfortable it made me. Still, I kept my mouth shut. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who gets jealous over something harmless. But deep down, I knew there was more to this story. And as I would soon find out, Jason wasn't just some harmless work husband. He was a storm waiting to upend everything I thought I knew about my life. Clara insisted that Jason come over for dinner one evening. She was excited, saying it would be a chance for me to really get to know him. I wasn't exactly thrilled, but I thought, why not? Maybe meeting him face to face would clear up my unease. After all, Clara clearly didn't see the same red flags I did. Jason arrived exactly on time, carrying an expensive bottle of wine. "Thought I'd bring something special," he said with a wide grin, handing it to Clara. He didn't even acknowledge me at first, just strolled right into the house like he owned it. His confidence wasn't just apparent, it was overbearing. When he finally turned to me, he extended his hand for a handshake, gripping mine firmly. Too firmly. "Eric, I've been dying to meet you. Clara talks about you all the time," he said, his tone more patronizing than friendly. "You're a lucky man." The dinner started off awkwardly. Jason was the type of guy who filled every silence with his voice, making sure he was the center of attention. He told stories about work, stories that of course always painted him as the hero. "I mean, Clara's brilliant," he said, looking directly at me. "But every great talent needs someone to push them. That's where I come in." He smirked, and I felt my jaw tighten. Whenever I tried to join the conversation, Jason either ignored me or found a way to twist it back to himself. At one point, I mentioned a recent project I was proud of at work, only for him to interject, "Oh, that's great. At my firm we tackled something similar, but on a much larger scale. The stakes were insane." And then came the food critique. Clara had cooked most of the meal, but I had grilled the steaks. Jason, slicing into his, gave me a half smile. "Not bad. You've got potential, Eric. But I make a killer steak. I'll show you sometime." By the end of the night, my patience was wearing thin. Clara, however, was glowing. She seemed completely oblivious to how Jason had monopolized the evening and belittled me in my own home. As Jason was leaving, he clapped me on the shoulder. "It was great meeting you, man. You're doing well. Keep it up." His words were harmless enough, but the condescension in his tone was undeniable. When the door finally closed behind him, Clara turned to me, smiling. "See? Isn't Jason great? I nodded weakly, too tired to argue. But inside, I knew one thing for certain. Jason wasn't just a co-worker. He was a threat. And I wasn't going to let him continue walking all over me, not in my own house. After that dinner, Jason became an even larger presence in our lives. Though I should really say my life, because Clara seemed completely unaware of the tension he brought with him. It wasn't just the fact that she talked about him constantly. No, it was the way she talked about him. Jason thinks I should try yoga, she said one evening while we were watching TV. Jason says this new Thai place is amazing. We should go, she chirped during breakfast another day. Jason gave me some great advice on handling stress at work, she mentioned offhandedly, as if his advice were gospel. At first, I tried to ignore it. I figured if Jason was such a great coworker, then fine. He could be her professional ally. But it wasn't staying at work. Jason's influence was bleeding into our personal lives, and it was driving me crazy. It wasn't just his opinions about restaurants or hobbies either. Clara started making changes around the house based on Jason's suggestions. She casually mentioned that Jason thought the living room could use a modern touch and suggested we redecorate. He has a great eye for design, she said, her voice filled with admiration. I tried to keep my irritation in check, but one day it boiled over. She came home with a new tie for me, something Jason had apparently picked out because, in his words, my style was a little too safe. Jason thinks this color will suit you, she said, holding it up with a smile. I stared at the tie for a moment before responding. Since when did Jason become my personal stylist? Clara laughed, clearly not picking up on my sarcasm. Oh, don't be silly, Eric. He's just being helpful. Helpful? That man wasn't helpful. He was invasive. But what could I say without sounding petty or insecure? Clara trusted Jason, and any complaint I made would only come across as jealousy. So, I bit my tongue, even as Jason's presence became more suffocating. Things hit a new low when Clara started bringing home advice from Jason about our marriage. Jason thinks communication is the key to resolving conflict, she said during a minor disagreement we were having. He and his girlfriend do this thing where they schedule weekly check-ins. Maybe we should try that. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So now Jason is our marriage counselor? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Clara frowned. Eric, why are you being so defensive? Jason's just trying to help. Trying to help. Those words echoed in my mind, and I realized something important. Jason wasn't just trying to help, he was trying to assert control, and worse, Clara didn't see it. That night, as Clara fell asleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Jason wasn't just a coworker. He wasn't even just an overbearing work husband. He was a man who had decided he could walk into my life, my marriage, and my home, and take whatever space he wanted. But as much as I hated him, I hated myself more for letting it happen. Something had to change, and I knew it had to start with me. Jason had underestimated me, and for the first time, I realized I had underestimated myself. It wasn't going to happen overnight, but I made a decision that night. I was done playing nice. If Jason thought he could push me around, he was about to learn a very painful lesson. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind of day I usually spend recharging. Clara had gone out to run errands, and I was finally enjoying some peace and quiet. I made myself a cup of coffee, settled into the couch, and started flipping through a book I'd been meaning to read. Then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and Clara hadn't mentioned any deliveries or visitors. I opened the door, and there he was. Jason, standing on my porch like he had been invited. Hey, Eric, he said with a grin, casually holding a bag of something that smelled like food. Clara mentioned you might be home. Thought I'd swing by and say hi. Before I could respond, he brushed past me and walked into the house. He didn't wait for an invitation. He didn't even take off his shoes. I stood there for a moment, stunned, before closing the door and turning around. Jason was already making himself at home, setting the bag on the kitchen counter and looking around as if he were inspecting the place. Nice house, he said, nodding approvingly. Clara's mentioned a lot about it. Good layout, plenty of light. Feels cozy. The way he said cozy didn't feel like a compliment. Thanks, I muttered, trying to keep my irritation in check. So, what brings you by? He shrugged, leaning against the counter like he owned it. Oh, I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop off some lunch for Clara. She's always talking about how busy you both are, so I figured, why not help out? It sounded like a friendly gesture, but his tone made it feel like he was pointing out some inadequacy of mine, as if I wasn't doing enough for my own wife. I decided to let it slide. Clara's out running errands, I said, hoping he'd take the hint and leave. But Jason wasn't the kind of guy who took hints. No problem, he said, pulling out a chair at the dining table. I'll wait. Wait? For what? Clara wasn't going to be home for hours. I clenched my jaw and sat across from him, determined not to let him rattle me. For the next 20 minutes, Jason talked about himself, his latest work achievements, his fitness routine, even his weekend plans. He barely asked me anything, and when he did, it was only to segue back to himself. At one point, he leaned back in his chair and smirked. You know, Eric, Clara's always saying how chill you are. I respect that. Some guys get all bent out of shape about their wives having close friends like me, but not you. You're secure. I stared at him, trying to decide if that was a compliment or an insult. Clara and I trust each other, I said evenly. Of course you do, he replied, flashing that smug grin again. That's why she's so lucky to have you. Not every guy can handle someone like her. She's a powerhouse, you know? Takes a strong partner to keep up. There it was. The condescension. The subtle dig that he was somehow more strong or capable than I was. I felt my hands tighten into fists under the table, but I forced myself to stay calm. Jason leaned forward, his voice dropping as if he were sharing some great secret. If I'm being honest, though, Clara could do with a little more assertiveness in her life. You know, someone to match her energy. Just something to think about. That was it. The line had been crossed. I stood up, my heart pounding. You've overstayed your welcome, Jason, I said, my voice firm. Clara's not here, and I don't appreciate you coming into my house and disrespecting me. Jason raised his hands in mock surrender, his grin never faltering. Whoa, take it easy, man. No disrespect meant. Just having a chat. You can chat somewhere else, I said, pointing to the door. For a moment, I thought he might push back, but then he shrugged and stood up. Fair enough, he said, grabbing his bag. I'll catch up with Clara later. As he walked out, he turned back and said, You're a good guy, Eric. Just keep being you. When the door closed behind him, I felt a wave of anger and relief wash over me. Jason had made it clear. He wasn't just trying to be a friend. He was testing me, pushing boundaries, seeing how far he could go. But he'd made one mistake. He thought I was weak. He wouldn't make that mistake again. After that uninvited visit, I was determined to set boundaries. Jason had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let it happen again. But as fate would have it, he wasn't done testing me. It was about a week later when Jason decided to escalate things. Clara had asked me to help her set up for a small get-together she was hosting for her coworkers. I wasn't thrilled about it, especially since I suspected Jason would be there, but I agreed. Clara was excited, and I didn't want to dampen her mood. The evening started off smoothly. I played the gracious host, greeting her coworkers, serving drinks, and making polite small talk. Then Jason walked in, fashionably late, of course, with that ever-present smug grin on his face. Eric, he said loudly, clapping me on the shoulder in a way that felt more like a shove than a friendly gesture. Looking sharp tonight, I forced a smile. Jason, glad you could make it. As the night wore on, Jason made his presence known, dominating conversations and subtly undermining me at every turn. If I mentioned a topic, he'd find a way to spin it back to himself. If someone complimented me on something, he'd jokingly suggest ways I could improve. At one point, Clara mentioned a project I had been working on, something I was particularly proud of. Jason didn't miss a beat. "Oh, that's great, Eric," he said, nodding exaggeratedly. "You know, I worked on something similar once. The stakes were a lot higher, though. Super intense. But I'm sure yours was rewarding in its own way." I clenched my jaw, biting back the urge to snap at him. I didn't want to cause a scene, especially in front of Clara's coworkers. But Jason wasn't done. As the evening wound down, Jason cornered me in the kitchen while Clara was chatting with her colleagues in the living room. He leaned casually against the counter, swirling the drink in his hand. "You know, Eric," he began, his tone low and patronizing, "I have to give you credit. Most guys would be pretty insecure in your position." I raised an eyebrow. "What position is that?" He smirked, taking a sip of his drink before continuing. "You know, being married to someone like Clara, she's a powerhouse, man, a real go-getter. It can't be easy keeping up with her." I felt my blood boil, but I kept my voice steady. "Clara and I are partners. We support each other." "Of course," he said, nodding. "But let's be real. She's the star of the show, isn't she? I mean, everyone at work sees it. She's the kind of woman who needs someone who can match her energy, her drive. Someone assertive." There it was again. That thinly veiled insult. The implication that I wasn't enough for my own wife. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Jason, let me make something clear. You've had your fun, but this is my house, and you will respect me and my marriage." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Relax, Eric. You're taking this way too seriously. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." I was done. I didn't care about the party or the audience in the next room. I wasn't going to let this man walk all over me any longer. "Get out of my kitchen," I said firmly, my eyes locked on his. Jason smirked, taking a long sip of his drink before setting the glass down. "Sure thing, buddy." He walked out, but not before muttering under his breath, "Some guys just don't know how to handle the truth." That was the moment I knew this wasn't just a game to Jason. He was testing me, pushing me to see how far he could go. But what he didn't realize was that I wasn't the passive, easygoing guy he thought I was. He'd made a mistake coming into my home and disrespecting me. And the next time he tried to push me, he'd learn just how big of a mistake it was. It happened faster than I expected. The breaking point, I mean. I'd been holding it together, biting my tongue, swallowing my pride, trying to play the bigger person. But Jason was the kind of guy who didn't understand limits, at least not until they were forcefully imposed. It was a Friday evening, and Clara had invited a few friends from work over for drinks and casual conversation. I wasn't thrilled, but I went along with it because, honestly, I didn't want to seem petty. Of course, Jason showed up, fashionably late as usual, bringing that same smug, overconfident attitude he always carried with him. This time, though, something was different. He wasn't just trying to dominate conversations or outshine me in small ways. No, Jason was here with a purpose. To provoke me, to challenge me in my own home. "Eric, my man," he bellowed as he walked in, patting me on the back hard enough to push me forward a step. "How's it feel living the dream? Beautiful wife, nice house, easygoing life." I forced a polite smile and stepped aside, letting him through the door. Clara was busy chatting with her colleagues, completely oblivious to the tension building between us. Jason didn't waste any time asserting himself. He made himself the center of attention, telling loud, exaggerated stories about work and subtly undermining me whenever he could. If I spoke, he interrupted. If someone complimented me, he turned it into a joke. But the final straw came when he followed me into the kitchen, away from the others. I was grabbing drinks for Clara's friends, trying to keep my cool, when Jason sauntered in behind me. "You know, Eric," he started, leaning against the counter with that infuriating smirk. "I've been thinking, Clara's a lucky woman. Not every guy would be so accommodating." I didn't even look at him. What do you mean, Jason? He laughed, a low, condescending chuckle. Come on, man, you're not the type to rock the boat. That's good for her. She needs stability. A guy who won't get in the way of her ambitions. I turned to face him, my patience running thin. Jason, if you've got something to say, just say it. He stepped closer, towering over me, his grin widening. All right, here it is. Clara deserves someone who matches her energy, someone who can handle her fire. And let's face it, you're not that guy. That was it. Every ounce of restraint I'd been holding on to snapped in that moment. Get out, I said, my voice low and firm. Jason laughed again, shaking his head. Relax, Eric. Don't take it personally. I'm just being honest. You should be thanking me for keeping things interesting. And then he did it. He placed a hand on my shoulder in that condescending way he always did, like he was trying to assert dominance. Without thinking, I grabbed his wrist and shoved him backward. I said, "Get out." Jason's smirk faltered for a moment, replaced by something that looked almost like surprise. But then he stepped forward, his face darkening. "Or what?" he challenged. Before I knew it, we were in a full-blown fight. Jason swung first, but he underestimated me. Years of pent-up frustration and anger surged through me as I blocked his punch and countered with a shove that sent him crashing into the kitchen island. "You think you can walk into my house and disrespect me?" I shouted, my voice trembling with fury. Jason lunged at me again, but I was faster. I twisted his arm behind his back, and that's when it happened. A sharp crack echoed through the kitchen as his wrist gave way. Jason cried out in pain, collapsing to the floor, clutching his hand. Clara and her coworkers rushed in, their faces pale with shock. "What happened?" Clara demanded, her eyes darting between me and Jason. I stood there, breathing heavily, my fists clenched. "He crossed the line," I said simply, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Jason, still on the floor, glared up at me, his face a mix of pain and humiliation. "You're going to regret this," he spat, cradling his broken hand. But I didn't regret it. Not for a second. He had pushed me too far, and he had learned the hard way that I wasn't the passive, easygoing pushover he thought I was. This was my house, my marriage, and my life. And no one, not even Jason, was going to take that from me. The room was tense, silent except for Jason's groans as he cradled his broken hand on the kitchen floor. Clara stood frozen, her face a mixture of shock, anger, and disbelief. The other co-workers lingered awkwardly by the doorway, unsure whether to intervene or leave. "What the hell happened here?" Clara finally demanded, her voice trembling. I stood tall, still breathing hard from the fight, but I wasn't going to back down. "He pushed me, Clara, in my own house. I warned him, and he didn't listen." Clara's eyes darted between Jason and me, as if trying to piece together what had just happened. "Eric, you broke his hand," she exclaimed, her tone accusatory. Jason, ever the manipulator, groaned dramatically. I was just joking around," he said weakly, casting a pitiful look at Clara. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "That's a lie," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "He's been provoking me for weeks, Clara. You didn't see the way he talked to me tonight, the things he said. He's been disrespecting me and our marriage from the start." Clara crossed her arms, her expression shifting to one of frustration. "Jason's my friend, Eric. I don't understand why you've always had such an issue with him. Why couldn't you just ignore him?" "Because he doesn't respect you, or me," I shot back, my voice firm. "You might see him as a friend, but he's been testing boundaries from the moment he walked into our lives. He's crossed every line, and tonight, he went too far." Jason, sensing an opportunity, interjected weakly. "Clara, I swear I didn't mean to upset him. I've always respected you and your marriage. I thought Eric and I could be friends." "Friends?" I barked, taking a step toward him. "You came into my house, insulted me, taunted me, and then you put your hands on me. That's not friendship, that's arrogance." Clara hesitated, torn between her loyalty to me and her friendship with Jason. Eric, you still shouldn't have let it get physical. This could ruin everything. What's ruining everything? I said, my voice softening but still firm. Is you letting this man get too close to us. I've been trying to tell you, but you haven't been listening. The co-workers mumbled excuses and shuffled out of the house, leaving just the three of us. Clara knelt beside Jason, helping him to his feet. He winced dramatically, playing up his injuries. I think I should go, Jason muttered, avoiding my gaze. No, Jason, I said, stepping closer. You're not welcome here anymore. Stay away from my wife and stay away from this house. Clara looked at me, her eyes narrowing. Eric, you can't just ban him from my life. He's my co-worker. And that's all he should have been, I replied, my tone resolute. But he didn't respect those boundaries, and now we're here. Jason stumbled toward the door, throwing one last glare over his shoulder. This isn't over, he muttered under his breath before disappearing into the night. As the door closed, Clara turned to me, anger and confusion etched on her face. You've put me in an impossible position, Eric. How am I supposed to go back to work after this? What are people going to say? I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I didn't want this, Clara. But you let him get too close. You ignored the warning signs, and now we're dealing with the fallout. Clara shook her head, her expression softening slightly. I don't know what to think anymore. I need time. She walked past me, leaving me standing alone in the kitchen. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, and I felt the weight of what had just happened settling in. I knew this wasn't over. Not with Jason, and certainly not with Clara. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had taken back control of my life, my home, and my dignity. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. The fallout from the fight didn't take long to rear its ugly head. Jason wasn't the type to lick his wounds and walk away. No, he was the kind of man who thrived on control and losing it in front of Clara and her co-workers. That was an insult he wasn't going to let slide. A few days after the incident, Clara came home looking flustered. She tossed her bag onto the couch and crossed her arms, glaring at me. Eric, do you have any idea what kind of mess you've created? I set my book down and raised an eyebrow. What are you talking about? Jason's been telling people at work about what happened, she said, pacing the living room. He's painting you as some kind of violent, unstable man who attacked him for no reason. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is for me? I clenched my jaw, my anger simmering just below the surface. Of course he's spinning the story. He's trying to save face. Did you tell anyone what really happened? Clara hesitated, her expression torn. I don't know what to say, Eric. I wasn't there for most of it. All I know is that you broke his hand, and now everyone at work is talking about how you overreacted. Overreacted. The words stung, but I kept my composure. Clara, you know what kind of man Jason is. He's been pushing boundaries from the start. This wasn't an overreaction. It was a consequence of his own arrogance. She sighed, sitting down on the edge of the couch. I don't know what to believe anymore. Jason's been a good friend to me, but now, I don't know. That was the crack I'd been waiting for, the moment when she finally started questioning his intentions. But Jason wasn't done yet. The next day, Clara called me from work. Her voice was tense, and I could hear the frustration in every word. Eric, Jason's threatening to go to HR about this. He's saying you've jeopardized his safety and his ability to work. Let him, I said, my tone calm but firm. I'm not going to let him bully me, Clara, not at home, and not through you. It's not that simple, she replied. If he takes this to HR, it could affect my position too. I'm stuck in the middle of this, and I don't know how to fix it. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't thought about the professional implications this could have for her, and guilt began to creep in. But at the same time, I couldn't let Jason continue to manipulate her, or me. That night, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I started digging into Jason's history, reaching out to a few people I knew who worked in the corporate world. What I discovered didn't surprise me. Jason had a reputation for being a bully. He had a long track record of intimidating colleagues, pushing boundaries, and using his charm to manipulate situations in his favor. I shared this information with Clara, hoping it would help her see Jason for who he really was. She listened quietly, her expression unreadable. "If this is true," she finally said, "then he's been lying to me all along." "He has," I said, my voice steady. "And he's trying to turn you against me because he can't stand that I stood up to him. Don't let him win, Clara." The next day, Jason's revenge escalated. He filed a formal complaint with HR, accusing me of threatening his safety. Clara called me in tears, saying the situation had turned into a full-blown workplace scandal. "People are picking sides, Eric. Half the office thinks you're some kind of monster, and the other half is questioning Jason's behavior." "Good," I said. "Maybe now people will start seeing him for who he really is." But Jason wasn't satisfied with smearing my name. He wanted to destroy my relationship with Clara entirely. He started spreading rumors that he and Clara had been more than just friends, insinuating things that made her coworkers whisper behind her back. Clara came home one evening, visibly shaken. "He's saying things about us, Eric, things that aren't true. I don't know how to stop this." I placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll handle this together. But you have to trust me, Clara. Jason is doing this because he knows he's losing. He's desperate." And he was. Jason was trying to use his charm and his lies to salvage what little power he had left. But what he didn't realize was that I wasn't going to back down. And neither, finally, was Clara. After weeks of Jason's manipulations and underhanded tactics, I knew the only way to end this was to expose him for who he really was. Clara was caught in the middle, her reputation at work being dragged through the mud, and I was done sitting back while Jason tried to destroy our lives. I started gathering evidence, reaching out to people who had worked with Jason in the past. It wasn't easy. Most people didn't want to talk, either out of fear or because they didn't want to get involved. But persistence paid off. I eventually found a few former colleagues who had stories to share, and they painted a damning picture of Jason's behavior. One woman, a former co-worker, described how Jason had bullied her out of a promotion by spreading lies to their boss. Another man detailed how Jason had used his charm to manipulate the office into siding with him during a workplace dispute. It was a pattern. Jason thrived on control and manipulation, and he had left a trail of damaged careers and broken trust in his wake. I compiled everything I had: emails, testimonials, even a formal complaint filed against him at a previous job. I showed it to Clara, hoping she would finally see the truth. She sat on the couch, scrolling through the documents on my laptop. Her face was pale, her expression one of disbelief. "I can't believe this," she whispered. "He's been lying to me this whole time." "He's been lying to everyone," I said. "This is who Jason really is. He manipulates, he controls, and when he doesn't get his way, he destroys." Clara closed the laptop and looked at me, her eyes filled with regret. "Eric, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you sooner. I let him get too close. I let him into our lives." I placed a hand on hers, my voice soft but firm. "It's not too late to fix this. We can still fight back." The next step was taking everything to Clara's HR department. Clara was hesitant at first. She didn't want to escalate things further, but I convinced her it was the only way to stop Jason. When Clara presented the evidence, HR couldn't ignore it. They launched an investigation, and within days, Jason's carefully crafted facade began to crumble. Co-workers who had previously been afraid to speak up started coming forward with their own stories. The same charm and confidence Jason had used to climb the corporate ladder were now working against him, as people realized he had been manipulating them all along. Jason was furious. He tried to retaliate by claiming the evidence was fabricated, but the weight of the testimonials and his documented behavior was too much to dismiss. The breaking point came during a staff meeting where HR addressed the situation. Jason, ever the actor, stood up to defend himself, spinning a web of lies about misunderstandings and miscommunication. But Clara, sitting in the front row, finally stood up and spoke. "Jason, you've crossed every boundary imaginable," she said, her voice steady but firm. "You've lied, manipulated, and tried to pit people against each other for your own gain. I believed in you as a friend, but you used that trust to hurt me and my family. It stops now." The room was silent. Jason looked stunned, his usual confidence shaken. HR announced that Jason's contract was being terminated effective immediately. As he was escorted out of the building, the office buzzed with murmurs. For once, Jason wasn't the center of admiration. He was the center of shame. When Clara came home that evening, she looked relieved but emotionally drained. "It's over," she said, collapsing onto the couch. I nodded, sitting beside her. "It's over because you stood up for yourself. For us." She leaned against me, her voice soft. "I should have seen it sooner. I should have trusted you. I'm so sorry, Eric." I wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "It's not about the past anymore. It's about what we do now. We don't let anyone come between us again." Jason was gone, his reputation destroyed, and our marriage stronger than ever. It wasn't an easy road, but we had made it through together. For the first time in weeks, I felt like we had taken back control of our lives. And no one, not even Jason, could take that from us. In the days that followed, the house felt quieter, more peaceful. It was as if Jason's toxic presence had cast a shadow over our lives, and now, for the first time in weeks, that shadow was gone. But the damage he had caused, both to Clara's career and our marriage, was still there, lingering like an old wound that needed time to heal. Clara and I sat down one evening, the weight of everything that had happened still hanging between us. She broke the silence first. "Eric," she began, her voice heavy with emotion, "I need to apologize for not listening, for letting Jason get so close, for doubting you." I looked at her, seeing the guilt etched across her face. "Clara, I know you didn't mean for things to get this far. I know you trusted him because he seemed like a friend. But the truth is, I felt like I was losing you, to him, to his influence. And I didn't know how to fight back without becoming the bad guy." Her eyes filled with tears. "I let him manipulate me. I thought he was just being a supportive friend, but now I see how he used that to drive a wedge between us. And I hate that I let him do that." I reached out, taking her hands in mine. "We both made mistakes, Clara. But the important thing is that we're here, together, and we're going to make sure this never happens again." We spent the next few weeks focusing on rebuilding what Jason had tried to destroy. Clara took steps to repair her professional reputation, being transparent with her colleagues about what had happened, and setting clear boundaries with anyone who might overstep. Her co-workers, many of whom had also been burned by Jason's manipulations, rallied around her, offering their support. At home, we worked on us. For too long, we had let outside forces dictate our relationship, and it was time to take back control. We started having honest, open conversations about everything. Our feelings, our frustrations, our fears. It wasn't easy at first, but slowly, the cracks in our marriage began to heal. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, Clara turned to me with a small smile. "You know," she said, "for all his talk about being alpha, Jason didn't stand a chance against you." I chuckled, shaking my head. "It wasn't about being alpha, Clara. It was about standing up for what's mine, for us." Her smile widened, and she leaned into me. "I'm so lucky to have you, Eric. I don't know how I let myself forget that." As for Jason, his departure from our lives was as dramatic as his presence had been. Word spread quickly about his dismissal and the investigation into his behavior. Former colleagues from other jobs came forward, sharing their own horror stories, and Jason's reputation was effectively destroyed. He tried to reach out to Clara once, sending her a long-winded email apologizing for any misunderstandings and claiming he had only ever wanted the best for her. She didn't respond. "Some things aren't worth reopening," she said as she deleted the email. I couldn't agree more. Life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after everything we'd been through. But in many ways, we were stronger for it. The experience had forced us to confront issues we hadn't even realized were there, and it had reminded us of the importance of protecting what mattered most: each other. One night, as we stood in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner, Clara turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said, "I think I finally understand what makes us work." "Oh?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's not about who's more ambitious or who's more assertive," she said. "It's about trust, respect, and knowing that no matter what happens, we've got each other's backs." I smiled, pulling her into a hug. "That's all I've ever wanted, Clara. Just us together." And that's how it stayed. Just us together, stronger than ever, with no room for anyone like Jason to ever come between us again.